theory, bear arms, and they have to report and check in with Mexican authorities and a number of measures like that. DEA hated that. And there's been, of course, as we know, a whole laundry list of DEA scandals over the last few years. I mean, a laundry list, right? From the top to the bottom. So the DEA is, kind of persona non grata at the moment. And you see agencies like the FBI, which is supposedly, for domestic purposes, but obviously not, kind of trying to fill the void. And you see a turf war amongst U.S. intelligence agencies, all this alphabet soup of agencies, the DEA, the FBI, the CIA, right? Now, even Homeland Security, ICE has its own intelligence, agency embedded there.
Right.
So what you see is, right, kind of with the DEA kind of on the outs, other U.S. agencies trying to rush in to fill a void, which is unfortunately kind of natural.
Okay, so what's in it for Trump to go after these cartels that obviously, or that theoretically, the factions inside the DEA, CIA, FBI are working with anyway? What's the plan? I don't understand what Trump's trying to accomplish. Do you?
They have to show that they're tough on drugs, right? At least in rhetoric, right? And they have to have some high-profile actions to try to show that, so that they can get further budgets, right? Everybody's looking at ICE, and ICE is hogging all the budget now. The ICE budget is going up like this, much more than the DEA, the FBI, and the like. And they're looking at ICE and saying, if ICE is getting all that money, we have to justify us getting some of the cut. So you have to have some high-profile operations now and again, right? This is a big part of U.S. strategy for years, the so-called kingpin strategy. And the kingpin strategy is we go after the capos, we go after the bigwigs, we go after the guys at the top. We take them out, we do perp walks, we do flashy headlines, we do flashy trials. But nothing really changes underneath because it doesn't change the underlying dynamic. It doesn't change the dynamic, the social dynamic, the flight from the countryside caused by NAFTA and the free trade agreement, 30 years of neoliberalism in Mexico before López Obrador that hollowed out the state and created an opening for the cartels to go in. They don't want to touch all of that, those structural things. So they do flashy capo hits and perp walks and, they're big media splashes. Justifying budgets, justifying personnel, justifying a lot of weaponry, right? And so it keeps the whole machinery going.
And so, so here, according to this article from Common Dreams, let me just read this and get your take on it. The explosion of violence and instability. Now, was there an explosion of violence? I mean, there was some violence, right? There was
some violence. Right? After the killing on Sunday, there were roadblocks set up. A number of people were taken out of their cars by force. Those cars were burned, right? There was, some instability in Guadalajara and the Puerto Vallarta area. Nobody wants to deny that happened, and certainly people who were affected, that was a very serious matter. But compared to what one might have thought would happen, right, with the taking out of one of the world's biggest capos, it actually wasn't as big as, one might have thought, and it certainly wasn't anywhere near as big as what people were trying to play up. You saw people like Laura Loomer, right, saying that they were taking U.S. Tourists hostage on highways and hotels. That never happened. You had people like Dan Dix, this Canadian libertarian, saying, pray for us, the situation is terrible. And he's walking out in the street, which is all, pretty much in calm, right? You see people like Benny Johnson saying, these liberals are stuck in Mexico and they're begging Trump to get out. And you had one of the people mentioned in that video saying, just totally not true. Just total fake news with fake images and, all kinds of stuff that just goes viral. Just total out of control stuff. And it becomes, not only a war of narratives, but it becomes basically a war of, this avalanche of fake news. If you go to Mexico now, almost all the countries in calm, and even Guadalajara and Puerto Vallarta is basically back to normal. And interestingly, in a De Harris poll, which just came out today, 88% of the Mexico public agree with the operation, and 56% say it actually increased their opinion of President Sheinbaum. So there's obviously a delinking between what the Mexican public is seeing and what some of these hysterical, accounts are trying to play off online.
We'll be right back with more.